Experts estimate that carbon emissions in China fell by 25% between February and March. In Venice, the water is running clearer now that the boats have vacated the canals. In March, NASA satellite data found a 30% drop in air pollution over the northeast United States, the lowest level for any March since 2005. The coronavirus is first and foremost a human tragedy. Millions of people have been infected and hundreds of thousands of people have died worldwide. Economies are shuttering and people are suffering. But eventually we are going to return to something that resembles normal. People are going to go back to work or school, and industrial manufacturing and travel are going to start up once again. As a result, the positive environmental effects that we're seeing are likely to be temporary. With regard to the environment, how we emerge from the coronavirus pandemic will be crucial. I spent the last few days talking to scientists Jonathan Foley and Catherine Hayhoe, as well as Philip Gass, a public policy expert at the International Institute for Sustainable Development. We talked about how the pandemic is interconnected with the environment and how this gives us the opportunity to bring ourselves into a more sustainable future. First, let's start off with some basics of the coronavirus, what kind of disease it is, and where it came from.
The virus originated in animal populations. Scientists believe it was a bat because the genome of the coronavirus in bats is about 96% identical to humans. And then it was transmitted through an intermediary animal, perhaps a pangolin that was sold at a wildlife market in China, and from there it jumped to humans through a process known as zoonosis.
The novel coronavirus first emerged in humans in late 2019, and it's just one of many zoonotic diseases that we've seen in the recent past. These viruses are naturally occurring in ecosystems, but human activity is increasing the chances that a disease will jump from an animal population to humans. A Stanford study published on April 1st looked at contact between humans and primates in western Uganda. The authors looked at satellite data of forest loss and conducted interviews with people who lived around the forest. They found that the destruction of forests increases animal-human contact, and thus the chances that a virus would be transmitted from animals to humans.
As we shrink the areas where animals can live, they're forced into closer and closer contact with humans. As the geographic range of their food sources shift, and as increasing droughts and storms affect their foodability, animals are again forced into closer contact with human populations to look for food. And as we continue to traffic in wildlife, that also increases the risk of those diseases jumping from animal to human populations, as was the case here.
Just as climate change is making naturally occurring phenomena like storms and fires worse, ecological destruction is doing the same thing for diseases.
We might have gotten a couple of diseases like this naturally, but because we're breaking down these ecosystems and messing with animals in ways we shouldn't be, we're getting more and more of these kind of biological storms entering the human population, like the recent coronavirus pandemic.
So while human activity doesn't cause diseases like the coronavirus, it is certainly linked to their emergence. Other diseases like Zika and malaria are also tied to human activities. As the climate gets warmer, these diseases, which are carried by mosquitoes, enter new geographic ranges. So what are now cooler climates may see diseases that were once unique to tropical climates. What's more is that human activity can exacerbate a disease once it's taken place.
So for example, with SARS, which was a respiratory disease that we saw almost 20 years ago, if you got SARS, you were twice as likely to die from SARS if you lived in a city that was polluted by fossil fuels as you were if you lived in a city that had clean air or a place that had clean air.
The impact of human activity on the environment was well known before the coronavirus. In 2018, the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reported that the United States and other prolific emitters need to transition away from fossil fuels and cut carbon emissions to net zero by 2050 to avoid a level of global warming that could be seriously harmful to the environment and human health. As countries are now passing stimulus bills to alleviate the financial strain on their economies caused by the pandemic, people are calling on governments, which drive up to 70% of global energy investments, to also invest in clean energy transitions.
The decision we make now will impact us for 30, 40 years and may change the very way we run some of these industries. So I think there is an opportunity to accelerate some of these transitions that we can do, like fossil fuel subsidy reform. If fossil fuel energy prices are low, let's reform those subsidies. Let's redirect them to green industry. If there's a need need to invest public funds to create jobs, let's make sure those jobs are decent and good and they support communities that are in crisis right now. And so there's a lot of investment that's going to happen within the next, say, 6 months to a year. And so there is that opportunity there. But if we don't seize it now, we risk losing it and going back to sort of business as usual beforehand.
The US Senate passed a $2 trillion stimulus bill called the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or CARES. It's the largest economic relief package in modern American history. It includes direct payments to Americans, an expansion of unemployment, and aid to large and small businesses. But CARES fails to extend federal tax credits for green industries like wind and solar. This has led some experts and activists to characterize the bill as short-sighted. In another blow to the environment, the EPA announced that because of the coronavirus, it will not hold companies responsible if they don't follow environmental regulations. The rule, which was announced on March 26th, does not have an end date. It's not unrealistic to think of a stimulus bill that emphasizes the health of the environment. In 2009, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act created hundreds of thousands of jobs in the renewable sector. By 2016, approximately 1 million Americans held full-time jobs in solar, wind, and alternative energy industries. Additionally, CARES provides $58 billion to the airline industry. Initially, congressional Democrats tried to make it so the airlines who accepted this money had to commit to cutting their carbon emissions in half over the next 30 years. But this language was ultimately stripped from the bill.
What we saw in the past financial crisis in 2008 and 2009, I always point to what happened in the auto industry. And there was investment, there was stimulus, there was subsidies and supports to that industry, but they were very closely tied to the need to improve performance of that industry. And vehicle emissions regulations got really stronger in the immediate years following that stimulus and tied to that stimulus. That's something that can be repeated here as well.
The CARES bill that was passed in March is unlikely to be the last stimulus bill. Environmental activists are pushing for any future stimulus package to prioritize climate. The coronavirus pandemic also underscores another issue, which is the importance of listening to scientists.
I think we're seeing, unfortunately, parallels between the dismissal of science in health and the dismissal of science around climate change. It's really very cynical, and it doesn't really work, but it does create a lot of obstacles, creates confusion, and let's be honest, people died because of it. The misuse of science, not listening to it, not following its advice, claiming it's a hoax, sitting on this advice for months, and then reacting. That killed people. Let's just be honest about it. So we really do need to listen to the science, whether it's climate change or an epidemic, and act accordingly.
The outbreak of COVID-19 and the devastating health and economic crises that it's caused clearly shows how precarious our relationship to nature truly is. If we want to avoid similar situations in the coming years, we have to make a choice. Place the longevity of our planet and our health at the forefront, or continue to use limited resources that harm the environment. Despite its harmful effects, and there are many, the coronavirus pandemic response has also shown us that large-scale changes are possible, even in a globalized world, and that as an international community, people can mobilize and make sacrifices to ensure the health of ourselves, friends, and loved ones. Happy Earth Day, and thank you so much for watching.